Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Ellen.
Hello.
Happy Wednesday. How's everybody?
Good.
Okay.
It's
Shelley, you
after
got
month
through
end,
your-
but there's a
yeah.
lot of stuff.
Got through your first month end there?
Yeah. Slowly. But yes.
I mean, I feel like that's how it goes, right? Your first one is the clunkiest and the slowest.
Mm.
And then past that, it gets a little bit better each time.
Yeah.
Hey, Brandy.
Hi, Brandy.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and start kind of shifting that direction. I figured for today's deep dive, we could talk a little bit about like onboarding a new client in Keeper, because a lot of our time is spent in templates and in setting up the task for once we get a client, but the actual process of onboarding a client and when do you add the template and when do you connect them and all of that kind of stuff is another aspect of Keeper that we just want to make sure you guys have at least some exposure to, so that if you're not thinking about onboarding right now, but it's coming up in the future, you're at least not walking in blind. And then as always, we'll leave the second half of the call for any questions about that, diving into anything that you're running into after this last close, all that kind of good stuff. So does that sound okay with everybody?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. So, I mean, to get started, let's just have a bit of a discussion before we jump into anything crazy. Talk me through, like, in general, in any service-based business, onboarding is one of the biggest parts because there's so many moving pieces to it, right? There's so many pieces that you have to collect. There's so many pieces you need to do and make sure that paperwork is in. But especially for you guys, there's like an infinite amount of making sure that you have all the stuff to even start on the cleanup or to even start on the client. So walk me through overall feelings about onboarding, some of the things that get missed or some of the things that are like hard to keep track of, so that we can kind of fold that into our conversation.
I can tell you what I'm experiencing right now is I'm in the process of onboarding for a cleanup, and I have sent the email that has the, well, it's two emails. One is the welcome email that says, here's what I need from you, including accountant level access to your QuickBooks, like those sorts of things. And like, here's the portal in the CRM that I use, which is Dubsado. And you will get a separate email that says, that's the welcome from Keeper email. And so I have sent that maybe 10 days ago, those two. And then again on Monday, I sent a reminder because my original plan was to start their cleanup tomorrow. But I can't start until I have all their stuff. And so that's my, and I'm sort of behind on everything. And so if I can't start their cleanup tomorrow, that's fantastic, because I mean, they're just going to get pushed later. And so my issue is that I forget that they're sort of hanging out there and not that I haven't gotten a response yet. I mean, on Monday, I was like, wait, why do I not have TIPCO's stuff? What didn't I? And then I panicked. Did I even send the welcome email? So I had to go back in my sent mail and find that. And so for me, it's having a trigger or having something that reminds me that I have put my request out and I have not got back what I need yet, because I'll be just so busy doing everything else that will fall off my radar. And it's a waste of time that for me to go back into my sent mail and follow and like, did I even send it? It's fine for me to have to send a reminder, but to take the time to look up, did I send it or did I drop the ball? Have they been waiting on me? They paid me. They did my proposal and they signed their contract and they paid me in full. And I can't do anything for them. So anyway, that's my.
No, that's really helpful. Amber, just for context, we're talking about onboarding, and then we'll kind of fold in like how to kind of manage that process in Keeper and use some of the features over there. But Ellen, you're absolutely right that I think what you're talking about is not only like, I want some sort of transparency, even for myself, to make sure that I know what's getting done, what's still out there, where I'm at in the process, right? That like transparency on screen. I was going to say on paper, but on screen. But I think another part of that is I'm hearing is like your follow-ups and stuff like that, because part of it is like, okay, I need a reminder to remind myself to send the follow-up if it's not automated already in whatever system you're using, right? So there's the transparency about where you're at in the process and having all of that laid out in a like checklist, like what have I done? What am I waiting on kind of thing. And that way, when your brain pings about, oh gosh, where am I with this client? Because that naturally comes up. We don't want the stress and the added task of going and hunting down in your sent email, whether you sent it or not. And when that happened, and then there's the question of, well, is it long enough that I need to send a reminder or is it not? We want some of that to be at least dumped out of our brain, because that's the hardest part, is all of these little pieces to hold on to. It's like, okay, I need to send this. I need to wait for them to come back with it. If they don't come back with all of it, I need to send a reminder about that. And then once I get this, I have to start my whole process of cleanup before I can even really get into the work. Like there's so many pieces and parts that can get lost on our side and on somebody else's side before we even get started with the actual work that got paid for it, or that you're getting paid for, right?
So
like it's a lot of pieces.
And what you just said triggered me like sort of an obvious solution. And of course, this is in Asana and so I had checked that task in Asana that I had sent the email, but that disappears. And I'm sure there's a way for me to look up that I checked it off or whatever, but I was just like, anyway, so I had to go to sent mail, but the obvious thing is to create a task that falls right after that task that says, send a reminder if you have not, did you get a response? If not, send a reminder. And so when I send the initial request, put a date on that reminder for 1 week or however long I want. And so that reminder won't pop up. I mean, or when it does, if I already got the stuff, I can just dismiss it. But anyway, so building in a reminder task that I don't add the date to that task until
you sent that email.
Send the email.
Yeah,
right.
You sent the initial. And regardless of whether you're doing that in Asana or if that reminder comes as part of your Dipsato workflow, and that task, or whether you fold that into your Keeper template as a task, all of those are options. But I think that's a really great point that I wanted to catch here, is like there's part of it that's like getting the information from them and how do you organize and where do you ask them to go. But then the other part is what do I need to do to ask? So regardless of where that task lives naturally, where your onboarding process is housed and where that switches off, because I know that's part of it as well, is it may be in the CRM and then switch over to your project management at some point, right? Lots of factors here. But I think that's one of the biggest pieces that comes up for me on those kind of problems is, okay, let me like actually have tasks and reminders for sending the welcome email, for creating their client portal, for like adding a password and sending that over if I need to. Like there's all of these little pieces that if nothing else, you at least can check off and know that you did them for that part of your brain that's continually going to ping and be like, crap, did I forget something? So I think part of this is tasks and part of this is like organizing the other pieces in there. So I think that's a great piece, Ellen. Does anybody else have anything that comes up like really on the surface or that makes kind of onboarding difficult in these kind of veins that we can fold into our conversation?
I mean, it's still just at the end of the day, it lies with the client, the potential client on the client side. I'm trying to like onboard a new client. And I think just still trying to kind of think of ways to really just kind of incentivize them and encourage them to just get it to us as soon as possible. I think that continues to still be just a bottleneck that we can't get around because we're not the client. Like at the end of the day, they've just got to sit down and do it. I think outside of that though, and to kind of Ellen's point, I think that's part of the reason why I'm looking forward to trying to do basically the task management, a little bit of the CRM piece as it relates to onboarding within Keeper. Because if I'm in Keeper so much of the day and I get into a habit of checking my task list and whatnot and seeing that those onboarding pieces, those onboarding tasks are overdue from that client, like that's a trigger for me to go check up, maybe even add in, and I think it might be in the template, there might be already a task to add into like follow up if you haven't heard back from, within a couple of days and whatnot, already built into the template. But I think one of the other added potential bonuses to me, hopefully being able to actually move it all into Keeper, even though Keeper's limited in a lot of ways. Like I love Asana's breadth and ability to do some automation things on those task sides. It's just so much beefier than what Keeper is right now, but that's not Keeper's primary focus, and that's okay. If I can at least get Keeper to function well, 85% of my day is spent in Keeper when it comes to like managing my clients. And so if I'm in there in the tasks and I'm seeing those overdue tasks for those onboarding steps for that particular client, it
pings your brain.
It helps me remember. And I, at least in theory, I think it'll help me remember. I haven't actually had to do that yet because I haven't had to onboard a client quite yet. While I've been working on implementing, trying to get all the templates and whatnot implemented, which is part of the reason why I haven't actually gone in there and tweaked that particular template yet.
It's a lot. So
but my mind goes to, I think that could work well. If I can,
I think it's at least a starting point.
Get myself disciplined into going into Keeper and looking at the tasks, not just going into each close and like, okay, I'll start with this client and go through their and I'll start, but actually let the task list drive my day, drive what I do that day. I'm hoping it'll work.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a great first start. And I think from there, you'll have more feedback on the other side of that first onboarding to say what did work, what didn't work, and then adjust from there. But I think part of this that's hard is just like getting a framework to start with. So I think that kind of naturally leads us forward. Feel free to pitch in if there's anything like that comes up as you're talking about it, or feel free to have a sticky note next to you and write down some of the pieces as we're talking that you realize you want a task for, or you want a question for, or something like that. Because I think that's a really good practice, is keeping in mind what we're talking about, but having that external source of like, oh, that reminds me I need to do this. So at least give yourself the space to have something to record those light bulb moments as they come across. So what I'm going to do is talk you through some of the pieces that we can do within Keeper. Now, I want to put the caveat in that this does not mean that you have to do everything in Keeper. I just want to show you what's possible within the system. And then you know your firm best and you know the way you work best. So if you have Asana, if you have Dipsato, and you have other tools in the trade that you use for your CRM for onboarding, feel free to use this as a bit of a guidepost and then deviate and adjust as you need to. But I just want to show you what's all possible within Keeper to show you kind of that side. And if it sparks you on something that you want to do in Dipsato, that's fine too. So let me get my screen shared and do all of the technical bits really quickly. All righty. Can everybody see Keeper right now?
It just moved to the blue screen. It was on Keeper.
Just kidding. 1 second then. Okay, take 2. Any luck there?
Yep, we can see it now. And feel free to either just jump in with questions as we go, or if you don't want to jump in as we're going, feel free to put some questions in the chat. And we'll get to them at the end as well. So whether that's related to onboarding or not related to onboarding, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll make sure we get to them after this section.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Okay, so first and foremost, I think one of the biggest things that I want to make sure that you guys have in your awareness, whether you use it or not, or whether you use it for something else, is recognizing that you can add a non-connected client. And that sounds kind of duh, but especially when we're doing onboarding, even if we don't have access yet and we can't connect their QuickBooks, we can still have them as a client, mark their status, and add tasks or templates to that client as a bit of a placeholder until we actually bring them on. Now, this will mean that there's no price associated with them either until they're connected. So this is a nice kind of in-between way to add somebody to be able to see their status, see tasks in your normal kind of native place where you hold all the bookkeeping stuff, even if they haven't gotten you access to. So that's something that we've come across that is just like super helpful to remember that it's possible as a placeholder if you do want to start using like templates or anything like that. So that being said, I think that one of the pieces that is most helpful with doing that is being able to see the status and being able to see them in onboarding and having that a bright different color, right? So you can clearly see, oh, right, that reminds me. And you can add like, let me see if I have a view that does this in here. You can also add like a text field or something like this next to it to give you a little bit of a reminder for why that status is there. And that might be a good placeholder for onboarding. Here's where they're at in the step, waiting on bank access, anything like that, just an option there. But then whenever you go, you have a client in here, you can always go and create or add this onboarding template, right? This is ours to get started with, but obviously you can add more in here. And this is a great way to keep track of some of those tasks like you were talking about, Ellen, of like, did I set up their client portal? Did I go in and send the welcome email? Did I go in and do, this can go all the way from invoicing on, or you might split invoicing out, and that's the kind of trigger for after they've invoiced, then I need to start adding them into Keeper. So depending on where you want to split this up, there's lots of options here, but you can add as many tasks in here as you need to for onboarding, and being able to use the onboarding tab here, or tag, sorry, allows you to, within that client, just click on onboarding and see all of the stuff that needs to be done here. So I think that's a great option in here, just to make sure that all of these have that tag. And I'll show you how to do that in your task list, so you can filter and just see all of the onboarding tasks that you have on your list. And that comes especially helpful if you're onboarding multiple people at once, right? So you're trying to hold not only onboarding in general, but like multiple onboardings, and they're both going to be in different stages. So you can easily have a saved list for you as an owner or as a manager that's just your onboarding tasks. So that's an option there. But one of the things that I came across a really good discussion in the Keeper group about here recently was about adding non-transaction questions to your onboarding template. So this means that once you add these and add the template, it'll drop them into your client portal. And this can act as a bit of a training for your client, because from here on out, we're going to be asking them, if you're using the client portal, obviously, you're going to be asking them all of the transaction questions. You're asking them to upload files, everything like that through the client portal. So this is a way during your onboarding process to start training them and getting them familiar with not only answering questions, but uploading documents in this client portal and getting familiar from the get-go. So pausing there. Is that all making sense? Am I going a little bit too fast? No? Good. Awesome. So obviously these can be adjusted or added to, anything like that. But one of the other tips that I've come across in the group here recently is remembering to add templates as you need to. So there's a little bit of a tendency to, like, once you get a client connected, you want to just go in there and add, okay, I know I'm going to do monthly close. I know I'm going to do payroll for this client. I know I need a cleanup, and then I'm going to do onboarding. But remember that that means that you have a whole laundry list of tasks in there that can be really difficult as you're trying to just like keep your head above water to get them to where they're ready for monthly bookkeeping. So only encouragement there is to do it as you need to. you can always layer templates. That's relatively easy to do. So going in here and just adding the onboarding, or Ellen, in your case, like maybe going in and adding the onboarding steps so that you have any tasks or reminders or questions in the portal that you need to, but then going in and adding that cleanup checklist so that you have that next step whenever they do get connected. That can also be okay, I add a task for after they've connected or they've added bank access, connect in Keeper. Like that's another, a lot of these are relatively obvious of, yeah, I do need to do that, but remembering to add them as a task so that you or anybody on your team can have that little bit of external reminder can be super helpful as well. Let's see what else I can show in here. So let's show you how to do, if you've gone in and say for growth custom boards, they're in onboarding. I have some tasks that are checked off. I have some tasks that I just want to check in on where I'm at. You can easily go into tasks. And then as soon as this will load, we can go into the section and actually filter by that tag. So you could easily filter this by the client if that's all they're doing. But I think it might be helpful, especially as you get more and more onboarding going on, to have just an onboarding saved list where you've gone in and gone to section, non-closing tasks, and then you can choose any of these. So I probably won't have any for this demo in here, but just select onboarding, hit OK, and then save that view. That way, when your brain pings for, I don't know where I'm at in this process, or I need to know what's next, or what else I'm doing in onboarding, that way you have a really easy way to go back to it, especially if you have multiple clients. I think that's the thing that this really becomes handy for. So if you just have one client that's onboarding, you can go into their account and just see where you're at on the checklist. But if you're trying to juggle multiple at once, I think a saved view would be a really great way, or just going in here and filtering on the day that you need to that you have that ping, but just having that external reminder and a bit of a saved view to see at length where you're at in the process can be really helpful. All that still tracking?
I'm doing that right now.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, and then one of the last things I wanted to, well, I've got two more little bits and pieces for you. So when it comes to the actual client portal, if you're going to use this for this client, I highly recommend using it as part of your onboarding process for at least a couple of questions or something like that to get them in there and familiar. But if you're going to do that, you need to have a little bit of a task reminder or some sort of external ping that you need to go in and set up their portal. So what I recommend is going in and actually adding that resource page. We talked about that a little bit last Q&A, and I've got a resource for you that I'll send out after this call that I've put together on a couple examples from a sticky note and a resource and how to actually set those up. We'll see if my computer can load well enough to get this little guy to show up.
And I'm not sure if you guys have seen it yet, but within the last week or so, they've changed the name of Sticky Note. So it's no longer a sticky note. It is now the client portal announcements, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's still in the same place. It's
same place. It's just
the
called
only
something
thing that,
different.
the only thing is they just renamed it.
why on earth?
Client portal announcement. I think it might have been to.
I mean, a sticky note doesn't really necessarily denote. If you didn't know where that went, it'd be kind of a question mark,
point.
like, okay, where does that show up? But of course, I was on the same train, Ellen. I was like, why would you change it? And then I thought about it from the other side, and I was like, oh, well, I mean, okay, I can at least see that this is maybe a more intuitive name.
Just because I'm used to how it's called does not mean that that's the best name for it.
Does not mean that this is best. So in your client portal, if you have the sticky note, or I'm sorry, client portal announcement turned on, it'll show up here. So that'll kind of welcome your clients. You can put anything in here for like where to find. This is a really great reminder for people that the resource tab exists. Because that's one of the biggest things that we've heard is like, yeah, but my client will never go over to the resources tab. So 2 quick tips. 1, put that on your sticky note as a reminder. Like there are other links or further information in your resources, right? Laid out really specifically. And you can also, as part of your onboarding process, when you're talking about the portal and how to answer questions, or that you're going to get a reminder from Keeper, you could also put some resources about where to find this, or just a reminder that the resources tab lives here, or a quick Loom. Like there's ways that we can kind of highlight and add transparency on the front end of something so that people are less resistant on the back end. So
And as a
case,
reminder, oh, sorry, Erica.
yeah, go ahead.
I just
No, you're
wanted
good.
since we were talking about it, as a reminder, the announcement is firm wide. So every single client is going to see the exact same announcement on their dashboard. Exact same. Where you get to do variables is on the resources tab. Every client has their own individual resources tab. So that again is why it can be very important to put that in your client portal announcement, is to be like, hey, go to that resources page, because that's where you can really customize the information that you're making available to your clients there.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. I was on the exact same train, and that's what I was going to say next. So perfect. So yeah, if you're going to set this up for anybody, which I think is a great idea for, go ahead.
Can I just a quick question? I'm sorry, because I have to pop
Yeah.
off. How did you get to this screen?
Yeah, absolutely. So no, great question. That's not silly at all. So client portal, and then I just went preview here,
Gotcha.
but I'll send out a resource later that shows you how to actually add yourself to the portal. So it has an actual SOP in there, but once you've added yourself, you can just preview.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So
I was like, yes, it did. I was like, I missed a step, so no, I'm good.
No, I went fast on that. I'm glad that you asked.
And this is just a preview. You can't edit anything in this view.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
So if you're going to add anything in here and you're going to use this portal, that's something that you want to have on your onboarding task list to actually set up, especially on the resources page. Sticky note will show up. Once you have it enabled for all clients, it'll show up automatically, but the resources is something you'll have to add. But this can be a great way to, especially with new clients, give them information about how to reach you, what your hours are, those kind of pieces, add any like links or anything like that you need to. And then using this client portal as part of your onboarding process will help train them to, oh, here's where I go to answer questions. Here's where I go to upload documents, anything like that. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, the only other thing I was going to add about onboarding in general and unpacking kind of all of the messiness that is this a bit outside of project management scope. But I think when it comes to onboarding, one of the best suggestions that I ever had was thinking about your reminders on the front end. So obviously your first one is a welcome email. Makes sense, right? You're adding all the information in there. First reminder, I always heard the suggestion to have as a polite bump of, hey, just wanted to make sure you saw this and it didn't get buried in your inbox. It can be super, super simple. It doesn't have to be super complicated. But beyond that, where I got the best suggestions from a previous copywriter that I worked with is having a third one that adds more detail to that portal, to adding your bank account or to adding access. In case somebody's stuck there. That adds another reminder. They're going to get another ping in that same thread. So you're still acting as a reminder, but in case part of the issue is that you're stuck, I'm going to give you more resources to make sure that's not the issue. And then obviously just like adding a reminder at the bottom to reach out if they're running into any snags or questions, right? Relatively simple there. But then a fourth one that I got told about was having that fourth reminder, and you can adjust the number of these or how many or whatever. But one of the other key points to hit is if I've sent you multiple reminders about this and I still haven't heard anything back, I've never heard any questions, I'm going to send a reminder that, and how you want to say this is different for every person, but you want to remind them that we are on a timeline. And I don't mind if like, it's not going to affect my day at all, but in order to stick to the timeline that we have allotted for this cleanup or to get you set up and onboarded or to get you started or to get you to that next goal, whatever your motivation was to get started right now, in order to stick to that timeline, these resources are necessary for me to get started, right? Like having a tangible reminder about that can be really helpful, because I can say from the business owner end, it's easy for that to get put off and it to be on your to-do list forever, but you keep getting hit with fires or you run into a snag somewhere. Like there's lots of reasons that people might not send over something that's relatively easy to just send over. But an external reminder that essentially getting the message across that the longer we wait, the longer it's going to be until I can get you set up, is going to be helpful as part of your reminder sequence, so that you're not silently like building up a little bit of resentment, and you don't get hit with something later on that's like, well, what do you mean this cleanup is not done yet? Right? You're providing a little bit of cushion on your end and reminding them externally that like, hey, we are on a deadline here, and I don't mind. It's not going to change my day at all. This is less work on my end, in fact, but I am going to need you to do this before I can move forward on my work and get started. So that was the only piece I wanted to add in, because I know that that's not specifically project management, but that can be really helpful, because part of this is just getting the information that you need to even get started on the actual onboarding process.
No, I think that's helpful, Erica, because that reminder of the timeline, I mean, like, look, we're paused. Everything is on hold until you do your bit. Sometimes I think we forget to do those reminders. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, it's easy for that to be on our mind, but actually communicating that is super, super important, because again, if you communicate this transparently from the get-go, then you have the space on both of your ends to continue that communication. But it gets harder and harder to communicate that if you get hit with it 6 weeks later and somebody's like, well, I don't understand why this didn't happen already, or anything like that. Then you at least have some basis, and you're covering your butt, if nothing else. I feel that, Brandy. That heavy sack was like 100% onboarding. I'm just waiting on you, my dear. I feel that so hard.
And I have the emails that have been sent to you to back it up, and I can see whether or not you've opened them because I've sent them through Keeper.
100%.
I know you've been opening them. Or somebody's been opening them. Maybe not you, but somebody at that email address has been opening them.
They have been opened by some set of eyes that just need a set of eyes to actually go in there, or a set of hands to go in there and do the actual task.
Do this,
right?
Yes.
So I had two things kind of pop up into my mind, and I don't want to like rabbit trail or whatnot. If it
go for it.
We need to
Feel free.
touch on this later or whatever. One would be utilizing Keeper to onboard a new team member, which I know at the very least we can put in tasks. I think what I'm trying to kind of think through is there, like, can then they upload, whether it's the W4, all that information, like how can we communicate that to much like we push it out to the clients, because they're connected and whatnot through their QBO files, and whatnot, or whatever. Can we do the same thing with team members and onboarding them, getting their information and getting them up and running as a new team member? And then the other thing is just, I'm super curious how people are using that resources tab. And I saw a little bit there, with some of the information, which was kind of helpful for me. Because I think it could be really helpful, but it's such a blank slate, and it's such a how were you getting the formatting in there, like all the things. I know you can do some format, like I've already, just how are people kind of using that resources tab for either their clients as a whole, or like a mix between kind of firm wide and then also specifically, like I can already see where I'd love like some of that general kind of firm wide information, but then I have some specific needs for my client, like each client. I'm creating like Google Sheets, for example, that we're both referencing.
Right. And that would be perfect to put into your resources, is that link.
Right. And that's where I've been putting it for example, this one client, where I've got multiple Google Sheets that we're kind of referencing and updating.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm just kind of
No, this is a great question. I actually went down the rabbit hole in the Facebook group and skimmed through. There was a couple of threads about how are people using resources. So I'll send this over afterward, but I compiled them into a doc. So here is the one that Jody came up with and has been using for her client. And then here was the compilation of, it's in our demo and I kind of adjusted, but here was the collective suggestions in here for like contact info, scheduling, stuff like that.
Nice.
And then I also added, there was some that just didn't fit in here, but I wanted to provide a little bit of an idea bank. So here's a suggestion for at least the most common things I heard. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I think that this could be a really great way to just like get your brain turning, because like you said, it can be a bit of a blank slate and it can be hard to think about the stuff that you're not thinking about. So does this at least, do you feel like this might at least get you help started on that?
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me at all that you compiled this into a beautiful little doc, and that it might already exist somewhere that I just hadn't yet gotten to yet. And so that's why I was like, I don't, I didn't want to rabbit trail. I don't want to like, just hijack anything, because I knew
you're fine.
it might already be out there. I just hadn't gotten to it yet. But it's one of those, every time, even for this one client, every time I go into the resources tab, I'm like, I've got to figure out how other people, like, what are my
options here?
Yeah.
So it popped up in my mind again. I thought, well, I'll actually ask the question this time.
Yeah.
Brandy,
Does this exist somewhere for us?
she's gonna send it to you.
I actually just finished this
Awesome.
yesterday. So
Okay.
I'll
Yes,
send it
and I
over
know
in
that
my
Jody and
follow-up
I had
email.
talked about that, and she said you guys were working on it.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
But Brandy, what I
Yeah.
was going to say is like, well, anybody, as you guys go through this and ideas start to spark, the other thing to keep in mind is, what question do I answer all the time for my
All the
client?
time.
Like they ask
Yeah.
it over and over and over again. Those types of things drop into the resources tab. And whether it's part of your signature in your email or just a little blurb that you put in your emails all the time, but constantly redirecting directing your clients to the client portal and saying, hey, this information lives on your resources tab. Maybe you still give them the link in the email, but you're also directing them that, hey, anytime you need to find this, here's where it lives, and constantly redirecting them to that portal. It helps you because they're actually utilizing the resources, but also if they're in there, they're going to see questions.
The questions. Yes.
And they're more likely to click over and be like, oh, I can answer that real quick.
Right.
But when it's just an email that's like, hey, you've got 7 questions out there, it's so easy to dismiss.
Mhm.
But if they're like my client, we walked through it together. And I said, look, I've got this in here. I'm going to go ahead and put this one in here as well. And she goes, oh, this is great. It's all in one place and I don't have to hunt it down anymore. She was so relieved.
Nice.
And so now it's like, oh yeah, I just go to my client portal and it's there. I bookmark it and then I go there and all of the stuff I need is at my fingertips. So it's part of just, like client training and just directing them there every chance you get.
To remember to put those links there. I mean, I have email templates that say, here's a reminder of our meeting. Here's a link to our agenda, blah, blah, blah. And so if all of that could be in one place, that would, then my email could just be reminder of the meeting. Don't forget that everything you need is in our client portal.
Like, hey, the agenda is in the client portal.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great idea. This is, sorry to cut you off. One quick thought. This is also something I've heard when I was kind of digging through this thread and starting to think about it myself. There's a couple people that mentioned that during their kickoff onboarding call, they just quickly show the client portal. You don't have to go into anything super crazy, but just getting them some exposure for, hey, I'm going to add all of these to this tab, and this is where I need you to upload any documents like this and this and this that you haven't yet. Really good reminder, really good exposure without the resistance of somebody having to go into a new tool that they don't feel like they know or have time for. It can be a quick passing thing, but again, just extra visibility on that process and where everything lives from the get-go.
Absolutely. I was going to mention that too, like having a short loom that's generic for any client as part of your welcome email that says, hey, this is your client portal. Here's your link. And here's a video that tells you what it is. And that gives them that visual before they ever click to go into it. And sometimes that's really helpful for people. But I wanted to go back to Brandy's question about new team members. my theory is 100% you could do it because you can create a new team member template and non-closing tasks. You do not have to have them attached to anything. They can be a client in there without being connected to anything. So it's just clients there, and it's a place for you to collect your information. You may or may not want to keep all of their details in the client portal.
Sure.
Like maybe you want to move
But
it.
it's a place that you can collect it and then download it wherever you want to go. So yeah,
Yep.
it gives your team member one place to go. You could have a certain resources tab that's for your team members. Maybe it has a blank W-2 or a blank W-4 or W-9, like whatever it is that they need. Here's a blank one, just fill it out and reattach it. But you can have the onboarding questions already part of your template. So you just drop it in, send them a welcome email. All the questions and all the materials I need from you are in this portal. Go in, upload it, and you're rocking and rolling.
Yeah. Another idea I heard recently when it comes to like actually doing training or anything like that was to also create like a firm task section of like Lou's training or whoever's training. That way you have a transparent checklist that you can assign and will show up in their task inbox so that you can start training them on how to go to the actual task list and see what's assigned to them or see what's due today. So that's a way to do that outside of a client. That is another way to kind of get that same angle.
But with that in mind, you could also, because with firm tasks, you can't drop in templates. So it would be copy paste whatever tasks you need for them.
Yeah.
But if you did have them as a client, you could drop in a template that's all about training and have
just
tasks
into their non-connected client as that person.
Yeah. So you'd
That's
have
a really good, fun
you would
idea.
have your own onboarding question, like onboarding tasks. Once they are part of your system, you add them onto their own.
You just assign them to their own client.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah, like I can kind of see, you know, and part of me is like, okay, so would it be kind of one client per person, right? Or is it one, do I just create kind of a fake client that's like onboarding new team member, you know, like, and then everything can just be on that, in that one kind of fake client for onboarding a team member, and just as we're onboarding new team members, it's all done through that same one, because I'm not going to keep their information in Keeper. I am
you could do that.
Download it.
So if we just said new team member. But if you have multiple, here's where it would get sticky, is if you have multiple people, you're going to need multiple clients in here.
And that's where I'm still getting real good and used to how Keeper functions, and like how, like what you can do with the templates and where you can do it and where you can't, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. That's where I get like a little bit hung up. If we've got multiples, how's that work?
Okay, so if you had multiples and everybody's working the same thing, you would just have to say, drop the template in twice, assign them to this one, and then assign them to the next person. So if this is our new onboarding or team member onboarding checklist client, whatever you want to call it, and I want to add in, I don't even know what this is. Let me see if I can find one. Here, we'll just do like new employee. I want to add that to my client.
I don't think that worked.
It didn't work because it unselected them. Try again. Okay. So it's going to add it here. Well, you could have it like this to where there's now a checklist. All right, I need to, like, this is for the admin. Admin has all these checklists that I need to do for what I need to send as an admin to them.
Correct.
And then maybe there's one that's specific to the team member.
Correct.
And you drop the team member in here, and maybe you rename it and say that this is James or Jane.
Right.
And then you add another one and you label it Lou, or, you know, whomever. So you could, everybody could have their own task here. with their own checklist underneath it. That's one way to do it.
Okay.
You can also have them as tagged, whether it's, onboarding or training or
Yeah, you
anything
could
like
do
that.
team training or something like that.
But you can
One
also
other-
assign it to that new person.
Which is what I'd be
Here.
interested
Gotta
in,
go, yeah.
right? Because then they're getting, it pops up on, task list for
Right.
them, or it's getting,
Exactly. So it's practice for them. They're in here to do their onboarding and their training.
yep,
So they're already getting familiar with the system so that when you do add a client to their system,
yep,
it's not quite as overwhelming.
Yeah.
They at least have some familiarity with it.
okay. I think I'm gonna, because I have a feeling we're gonna be hiring a team member or two, soon. And so I'm trying to get some of my ducks in a row for that.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a big piece in terms of just, again, just having a systematic approach to make sure we're getting all the things that we need. But how can I utilize Keeper if I could utilize Keeper? And I kept coming back to absolutely, like, and to some extent, I've already kind of played around with a little bit of a template. It's a spoof of kind of the onboarding, like the new client one plus one that I got from Alyssa when I was doing Asana, right? It's kind of a mix of those two. I was just I hadn't been able to go sit down and think through how could I actually get it to get that information, tag a person, add the new team or like to the task list and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If they're not an actual QBO, but I hadn't thought about the fact that we can add non-QBO clients,
Right.
and that might be the solution. That might provide the avenue then that I would need. So I think this
One
gives
thing-
a lot of hope and encouragement.
Yeah. One thing that I just thought of, Brandy, is if you are onboarding several team members at the same time and they're all using the same portal, then they're all going to have access to the same information. So if, team member A uploads their license and their W-9 and whatever other details, then team member B technically could go in and find that information. Not necessarily that they would or that there'd be an issue, but just be aware that there will be access to some
true.
sensitive information depending
So
on
the
what you're collecting
training,
from
so
them.
maybe the training could kind of just be one like fake client, one account in there, but each team member, my gut was kind of leaning toward each team member probably needed to be their own, as if they were
For
a
the
client,
portal.
like be their own, and have their own portal and whatnot. But I might be able to get away with like a training portal that's kind of firm wide and whatnot, because all that information is going to be the same.
Yeah.
They can have access to all of that. But that's
And they'll know where they are with their fellow team members. Like,
Correct.
okay, we're both new. Hey, did you understand this? Did you it can kind of open up that communication between your team members too. I think that's a great idea.
okay, cool.
And I think you can still cycle your client portal. It's
Mhm.
just, you would only want one person in at a time. So
Right.
if you have
Fair.
multiple people on at the same time, maybe
Fair.
you do multiple clients. But then if you only have one coming in, you just take all that information out, clear it out and then add
Right.
the new person on.
Give them a deadline. I gotta have all this by
Yeah.
this date.
Mhm.
Get it so that we can get it out of there and then get the next person
Right.
onboarded.
Yeah, that's definitely a way that you could do
True.
it.
That's true.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to mention is just to think through as you're doing that single if you're doing that single task, and this is all of Jane's training stuff, the only ping that I had in my brain that you might want to just make sure that this isn't a non-starter for you or you don't need to work around this is that would eliminate you from setting as many deadlines. You would just have one
Right.
assignee, one deadline per the entire checklist. So that was the only thing I was thinking about, was just making sure that that was fine with you, or
Yeah.
at least thinking about that on the front end. And if that's not, you may break it down into somebody's
Sections.
week 1 tasks.
Yep.
And then it's that checklist, and then there's week 2 tasks for both people, so that you
Yeah.
could create a couple more deadlines around
Yeah.
that if you wanted a little bit more structure. for
Yeah.
that.
That, and if you want to get them
used.
used to using the task list, then you
Yeah, that's so
having more
that's super
tasks
fair
in
too.
there. But same thing, you can still assign, you know, whether they have 1 task or 10 tasks in there, assign
Sure.
it to them. And you could have 20 tasks because you've got 2 people in there or more. And as long as it's assigned to everybody, then they can get used to using the task list and used to
Yep.
filtering and that kind of thing.
That's good. This is encouraging.
Yeah, a great question.
Glad to hear. No, this is the stuff that's honestly really fun. Is the like, okay, but how can we use it this way? Can we make it do this?
Yeah.
That's the most fun. Like, we're obviously happy to answer any more like run of the mill. How does this work? How does this template work? But that's the fun stuff. It's like, what can we make it do? What can we get around?
That's awesome. Oh, good. I
Amber, I want
appreciate
to
it.
give you a chance. Did you have any questions today?
Yes. I was noticing that we're using HubDoc to push receipts, to collect receipts, and then pushing it to QuickBooks. And what I noticed was in Keeper, when we have the receipts with no attachments, they clear out of that, but there's no way for me to filter that section to go back and remove the comments of asking for receipts. So I have to go back to like the very top to see any outstanding questions and then go through one by one to see who has an attachment and then remove the question.
Right.
And I've tried setting up like a different like scenario,
But
but
you're right. Once it's attached, it disappears from that.
yeah. And it's not under like reviewed. It just completely
right.
like,
It's completely gone. Once it has an
Yeah.
attachment, it's completely off of there. That's right. I'm brainstorming.
yeah. So the difficulty we're having is then we're saying, you know, one of the things is we weren't going back and seeing what was it's removed from the list below, but it's still like part of the transactional questions, and we weren't going back and double checking that. And then we were, you know, we look to the client because now they're like, oh, we did do that. And then
So-
we have all this.
Top of mind here. And if I figure out like a different way to do it, I'll let you know. But I do think that coming here to your transaction questions and looking, but like, I don't know, I'm trying to see. You can't tell what, no, yeah, you can see if there's an attachment.
There is an attachment, but if there's an attachment for like a W-9 for the vendor, it's going to show up as like files in there. So each one of them, you have to open up and then just look at the wording of the name of like what's in there.
Oh, so like you have to
say-
look at the document to make sure it's the right one.
Yes.
Oh, because I was like, okay, so if you've got these, you could bulk close them or remove the.
Yeah, but they might include like a W-9 or a contract related to that vendor, and it's going to sit in the files. So it's not like, it's not an easy way to like go back and say,
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, because this is like W-9 and then receipt. This would be a great canny request out there for Keeper. I will keep brainstorming off the top of my head. This is the only way that I could think to like easily see what's there and to be able to remove it so that your client doesn't have it constantly repeating for them. But it's a tedious way to do it,
yeah.
which
So
I
it's
totally
like,
understand.
and I'm thinking like, okay, well, instead of just like finding the transaction in QuickBooks, maybe pulling it down and attaching it inside of Keeper. But I think we would still run into the same issue, because if we attach it, will it still stay in there, or do we have to hit the rerun report for it to move out of the queue?
I'm thinking. I feel like this would be a good thing for them to add on to their extension, because we can ask questions and we can edit the questions from the bank feed.
Yes.
I have not tested it out to see, like, once it's been categorized and, you know, it's in expenses or income, that can I go to that and still see the question?
Now,
So
there's
like that
nothing.
would be something
Yeah.
that we might be able to ask, but again, that's going transaction by transaction to make sure that it's correct and moving on. This might be a good one for us to brainstorm with Keeper. We'll look on Canny to see if anybody else has requested something similar to this, and we'll keep brainstorming. Until then, I think it is just going to be a tedious effort to clear them out.
Mhm.
But we'll see if we can find another solution for you, or see if Keeper can get a solution on the roadmap.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah. All right, ladies, so I know we're right at time. We're happy to stay on a couple minutes if anybody has any last minute questions, but I also don't want to take up more of your time than I need to. So feel free to wrap up and hop up, or feel free to ask any questions if you'd like to. We're happy to take your direction.
I think I'm good. Thank y'all so much.
You're welcome, Brandy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll see y'all later.
Okay, bye.
A question.
Yeah.
Have either one of you guys heard of like pure bookkeeping workflow?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on it?
So I did not end up going through it myself. I worked with somebody who went through it and was trying to utilize it. I don't know if that particular person, if he really felt like it was worth it for him.
Mm-hmm.
It does kind of take, you learn all the basics from Ben with Bookkeeper Launch and like kind of how to get going. In theory, pure bookkeeping is meant to be like, okay, here's the next step on how to be efficient and how to get your workflows in place and then scale.
Yes.
So that's my understanding of what it is. I have not seen firsthand all of the details that come with it. But so that's the only experience I have with it, is
Okay.
one person I've worked with.
I like Keeper, but I just feel like it's a little bit too like clunky. I don't know how else to say that. So I have looked into it, but I have not like seen it in person to touch and feel it and see if that's really like the direction that I want to go in.
Because they just came out with a app too, didn't they?
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like the full
That
thing.
wasn't available when I was working with somebody who'd been through it. They were just coming out with it, so I never saw what it looked like.
Well, if I move forward with it, I'll let
Okay.
you see it, because you can add like you can add members in there, and it's like no additional cost. They changed the pricing structure.
Oh.
So yeah, so I'm, it's like another investment. I would still keep Keeper to do like these tasks that I'm doing, but just as far as like overall picture, I don't know if it's easier to see in the workflow, like pure booking workflow versus Keeper. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, one idea that I had, and pardon if you've already done this, you might ask in any of the groups that you're in, like the Bookkeeper Launch or anything like that, if anybody has tried the new app before. Especially in this community, it's a really like open one. So if you connect with somebody, they might let you in to just like Zoom share what it looks like, or at least be able to ask
That's a really good
about
point.
it. So that's where I would start, especially because Jody and I don't have like the hands-on experience. That's where I would start first, and see if you can either ask somebody questions and be kind of critical and be like, okay, but what about this? Like, is this really good? Or like, just kind of be able to ask those questions that you already have on your mind. Or they might let you see on the inside and see a little bit of it.
Okay. All right.
Great idea.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it was great to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice to see you.
And I love the picture that's on your wall, by the
Oh,
way.
thank you so much.
Oh, it is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, Amber.
Awesome.
Hope to see you
All
again
right.
Have a
soon.
good one, Amber.
Okay, we'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.